My phone vibrated in my pocket as I threw the first handful of dirt onto her coffin. It felt like I was desecrating the moment, but something forced me to look. An unknown number, a message that froze my blood. I'm still alive. Trust no one. The contact name was Emily, my wife. The same woman everyone was mourning inside that mahogany box in front of me. The dirt slipped through my fingers. I looked up, and for the first time since the funeral began, I truly saw my sons. Charles was impatiently adjusting his Italian tie. Gregory checked his Swiss watch every 5 minutes. Where was the grief? Where were the tears for the woman who brought them into the world? My name is William Johnson. I'm 68 years old, and until 3 days ago, I thought I knew my family. Now, standing in front of the grave of Emily, my partner of 45 years, all I see are strangers. The priest finished his sermon as I put my phone away. The words were lost in the cold wind of the town where we built our life, and where now, supposedly, Emily would rest forever. Our house was only a 20-minute drive from the cemetery, a mansion I built with the sweat of my own hands, starting from a small mechanic shop to becoming the owner of the largest chain of car dealerships in the state. "Dad, it's time to go, Charles," my firstborn interrupted, placing a hand on my shoulder with fake compassion. "The guests are waiting for us at the house." I nodded, unable to speak. My mind was still fixed on that impossible message. We got into the black SUV. The driver drove in silence as I studied my sons' profiles, searching for any trace of the love Emily and I had given them. Charles, a corporate lawyer, always hungry for more. Gregory, a financier, calculating since he was a boy. Both successful. Both as cold as the marble of the headstone we had just left behind. The patio of the house was filled with people dressed in black. Neighbors, friends, business partners, local politicians. They all wanted to offer their condolences to old William Johnson, the man who had built an empire from scratch, the mechanic who became a millionaire. I shook hands automatically, like a programmed doll, while my mind replayed the last few days. Emily's death had been sudden, a heart attack, while I was out of state, closing the deal on a new dealership. By the time I got home, she had already been declared dead. They wouldn't let me see her. "She's in bad shape, Dad," Gregory had said. "We've already taken care of everything. The funeral was organized in record time. The casket is closed." "And, out of respect," Charles explained. My phone vibrated again as they served coffee in the main living room. The same number. Check the security videos of the house. May 10th, 3:40 p.m., back garage. May 10th was the day Emily died, 3 days ago. Excusing myself, I walked to my office. I locked the door and turned on my computer. The security system had been Emily's idea last year, after a robbery attempt in the neighborhood. 16 cameras distributed throughout the property. I accessed the files and selected the date, May 10th. I found the recording of the back garage. 3:38 p.m. Emily walks in normally, looking for something on the shelves. 3:39 p.m. Charles appears behind her. They argue. Emily shakes her head several times. 3:40 p.m. My son shoves my wife against the wall. He yells at her. She cries. 3:41 p.m. Gregory enters. He's holding something in his hand. A syringe. Between the two of them, they restrain Emily. 3:42 p.m. My wife falls to the floor. She convulses. My sons watch, motionless. 3:43 p.m. Gregory checks his mother's pulse. He looks at Charles. He nods. I turned off the monitor. The buzz of conversations from the patio continued, oblivious to the hell I had just witnessed. My own sons had murdered my wife, and now they were out there, receiving condolences, faking grief. Another message arrived. You'll find a letter in our special place. I love you, W. You're Emily. Our special place. Only Emily and I knew that code. It was the secret compartment behind the bookshelf in our bedroom, where we kept important documents and some personal memories. With trembling legs, I went up the stairs to our room. Emily's scent still lingered in the air, her jasmine perfume, her lotions by the vanity, the bed where we had slept together for the last time, just a week ago. I activated the mechanism on the bookshelf, which slid open silently, revealing a small safe. I entered the combination 230978, the date we met. Inside, I found a sealed manila envelope, my name written in Emily's unmistakable handwriting. I opened it with shaking fingers. My dearest William, if you are reading this, it means my suspicions were true. Do not trust our sons. For months, I've noticed strange behaviors. Conversations that stop when I enter a room, unexpected visits from Charles when you're not home, financial documents that disappear. I hired a private investigator. His name is Michael Sanders, a former federal agent. You will find his number at the end of this letter. He has all the proof. Charles and Gregory are in debt up to their necks. Failed investments, gambling, overvalued properties. They found out you changed your will last year, leaving a large part of our assets to charitable foundations. They couldn't accept it. I heard them, William. They were planning to eliminate both of us. First me, then you. A tragic accident, followed by your devastating depression and suicide. If I am dead when you read this, you must be careful. Pretend you know nothing. Contact Michael. He has prepared a plan. Forgive me for not telling you about this sooner. I wanted to protect you from this horrible truth. How do you tell a father that his sons are planning to murder him? I have loved you every day since I met you at that party all those years ago. You were my first and only true love. If I have died, do not mourn me for too long. Live, my love. Get justice, and then find peace. Forever yours, Emily. Tears blurred my vision. I held the letter to my chest as I sobbed silently. Emily had foreseen her death. She had tried to protect me until the very end. At the bottom of the envelope, I found a small card with a phone number and the name Michael Sanders. There was also a USB drive. I heard footsteps in the hallway. Quickly, I put the letter and the drive in the inside pocket of my jacket. I closed the safe and moved the bookshelf back into place just as the door opened. Dad, what are you doing up here alone? It was Gregory, with a smile that I now saw was loaded with deceit. The guests are asking for you. I needed a moment, I replied, discreetly wiping my tears. You know, remembering your mother. Of course, I understand. His gaze scanned the room, pausing briefly on the bookshelf. Do you need help getting down? No, son. I'm fine. Gregory nodded and offered his arm. I took it, faking weakness, leaning on the arm of the man I had just watched kill his own mother. My body trembled, but not from grief. It was rage, a cold, methodical rage that was beginning to build inside me. The rest of the afternoon passed like a slow-motion nightmare. I shook hands, received hugs, listened to words of comfort that slid off me without penetrating, all while watching my sons move among the guests like perfect hosts, receiving condolences for the mother they themselves had murdered. Richard Miller, my lawyer and friend of 30 years, approached me discreetly. William, whenever you need to go over Emily's papers, I'm at your disposal, he said in a low voice. There are certain matters we should attend to soon. What matters, Richard? I asked, studying his face. The life insurance, mainly. Charles mentioned to me that Emily increased it a few months ago, a considerable sum. I had never heard about such an increase. Emily and I shared all financial decisions, or so I thought. We'll talk about it later, I replied, keeping my expression neutral. Maybe tomorrow, when there are fewer people. Richard nodded and walked away. I watched him chat animatedly with Charles in a corner. Was my lifelong lawyer involved too? How deep did this conspiracy go? By 8 o'clock, the last guests had left. The house fell silent, now inhabited by only 3 men, a devastated father and 2 murderers. Dad, you should get some rest, Charles suggested, patting my back. It's been a very hard day for everyone. Yes, maybe you're right, I conceded, feigning exhaustion. Are you two staying here tonight? Of course, Gregory replied. We wouldn't think of leaving you alone right now. They didn't want to leave me alone. Of course not. The second part of their plan must already be in motion. Thank you, sons, I murmured, hugging them both, suppressing the urge to strangle them right there. I don't know what I'd do without you. I went up to my room, locked the door, and sat in the darkness. The silence of the house seemed to amplify the beating of my heart. I took out my phone and stared at Michael Sanders' number. It was almost 9 at night. Too late to call? I decided to send a message. This is William Johnson. Emily left me your letter. We need to talk. The reply came almost immediately. I've been waiting for you, Mr. Johnson. Do not use your regular phone to communicate with me. It is likely being monitored. In your garage, under the red toolbox, you will find a burner phone. Use it to call me. Trust no one inside your house. I stared at the message for a long time. Emily's paranoia had not been unfounded. She had prepared everything, anticipating the worst. I waited until the house was completely silent. At 11:30 p.m., I took off my shoes and slipped quietly out of the room. I went down the stairs, avoiding the steps that creaked, knowledge acquired from decades of living in this house. I crossed the kitchen and entered the garage. The red toolbox had been mine for years. I opened it carefully and lifted the top tray. Underneath, just as Michael had indicated, I found a small black cell phone with its charger. I turned it on. It had only one contact saved. MS. I returned to my room with the same stealth. Once safe, with the door locked, I dialed the number. Mr. Johnson. A deep voice answered on the first ring. I'm deeply sorry for your loss. Are you Michael Sanders? Yes, sir. Your wife hired me 2 months ago. I have all the information you need. But we can't talk on the phone. We need to meet. When? Tomorrow. Your sons are leaving at 10 a.m. to meet with the lawyer, Richard Miller. I know because I intercepted their communications. We'll have about an hour. There's a coffee shop on Morelos Avenue. The old one. I'll be at the back table at 10:15. I'll be there. I promised. Mr. Johnson, one last thing. The USB drive Emily left you. Do not look at it on your computer. Bring it with you tomorrow. And for God's sake, act normal. Your life depends on it. The call ended. I sat in the darkness, holding that small phone as if it were a life raft in a stormy ocean. Through the window, the moon illuminated the garden that Emily had designed with so much love. The rose bushes she pruned every morning, the fountain where the birds drank at dawn. Everything seemed so normal, so peaceful, and yet my world had collapsed in a matter of hours. I lay down fully clothed, too alert to change or try to sleep. The clock read 12:30 a.m. when I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. Someone stopped in front of my door. The handle turned slowly, but the lock held. The footsteps moved away. Charles, Gregory, both. Had they come to check if their father was asleep, or to execute the next phase of their plan? My regular phone vibrated on the nightstand. A text message from Charles. Dad, are you awake? I heard noises in your room. Do you need anything? Lies. More lies, I replied. I'm fine, son. Just can't sleep. Tomorrow is another day. Get some rest, Dad. We love you. We love you. The cruelest words I had ever read. The sunrise found me sitting by the window, watching the light transform Emily's garden. I hadn't slept. I hadn't cried anymore. The initial shock had given way to a steely determination. I showered and dressed carefully, choosing an outfit appropriate for a recent widower. A dark shirt, gray pants. The watch Emily had given me on our last anniversary. I put both phones and the USB drive in my pockets. When I went down to the kitchen, I found my sons making breakfast. Dad, we didn't expect to see you up so early, Gregory exclaimed, pouring coffee into porcelain cups. I couldn't sleep much, I replied, sitting at the table. The bed feels so empty without her. Charles placed a plate of fruit in front of me. Eat something, Dad. You need to keep your strength up. Thanks, son. I picked up a piece of melon and studied it carefully before bringing it to my mouth. Could it be poisoned? Was this how they planned to get rid of me? A toxic breakfast served by filial hands? By the way, Dad, Charles began, sitting across from me. Gregory and I have to go out for a bit this morning. Richard wants us to review some preliminary papers about, well, legal matters. Mom's will, Gregory clarified, always more direct. Life insurance issues, things that have to be taken care of even if it's painful. I understand, I said, nodding slowly. What time will you be back? Before noon, for sure, Charles replied. Will you be okay alone for a little while? Of course. Maybe I'll go for a walk. The doctor always says walking is good for me. Good idea, Dad, but don't overdo it. We ate breakfast in an awkward silence, broken occasionally by trivial comments about the weather or sweetened memories of Emily. I barely touched my food, limiting myself to moving the fruit pieces around the plate and pretending to drink the coffee. At 9:45, my sons stood up simultaneously. We should get going, Charles announced, checking his watch. We'll be back soon, Dad. I walked them to the door, waving as Gregory's car pulled away down the driveway. The moment they were out of sight, I ran to my room. I grabbed a light jacket and the keys to my own car. The old coffee shop was a 10-minute drive. I parked a block away and walked the rest of the way, constantly looking around me. Paranoia was starting to set in, but perhaps it was justified. The place was small, cozy, with wooden tables and the aroma of freshly ground coffee filling the air. In the back, just as he had promised, a man in his 52nds, heavy-set, with salt and pepper hair and a faint scar above his left eyebrow, raised his hand slightly as he saw me enter. I walked towards him, feeling the weight of curious gazes. No doubt my face had been in the local papers. The widower of the day. Mr. Johnson, the man greeted, standing up and shaking my hand firmly. Michael Sanders, please, sit down. I sat across from Michael Sanders, feeling the weight of the world on my shoulders. The coffee shop was quiet at that hour, with only a few tables occupied by people engrossed in their own conversations. First, Mr. Johnson, I need to make sure you weren't followed, Sanders said in a low voice, his eyes scanning the place. Your sons have people working for them, people I know from the scene. What scene? I asked. The criminal underworld of this city. I was a federal agent for 20 years. I know the local players, he paused. And now, some of them work for your sons. A chill ran down my spine. My sons, Charles and Gregory, had always been ambitious. But criminals? When did they cross that line? Did you bring the USB drive? I took the small device out of my pocket and handed it to him. Sanders pulled a thin laptop from his backpack, opened it, and plugged in the drive. Your wife was a brilliant woman, Mr. Johnson. She started to suspect when she found documents forged with your signature, transfers to accounts in the Cayman Islands. She hired me to follow the money trail. How much? I asked, dreading the answer. $12 million siphoned over the last 3 years from your companies. He turned the screen towards me. Here are the records. Forged signatures. Ghost contracts with suppliers that don't exist. I looked at the documents, recognizing names of fake companies and supposed subsidiaries I had never authorized. My signature, perfectly mimicked, appeared at the bottom of each document. Emily discovered all of this by reviewing the financial statements. When she confronted Charles, he denied everything, but she had already gathered enough proof. And that's why they killed her, I murmured, feeling a wave of nausea. Yes, but there's more. Sanders pulled a folder from his backpack. This is your wife's real autopsy. The official one was falsified by the medical examiner, an old friend of Charles. I opened the folder with trembling hands. The report was clear. Emily had died from poisoning with a substance called tetrodotoxin, a poison extracted from pufferfish, almost impossible to detect without specific tests. Tetrodotoxin causes progressive paralysis. It looks like a heart attack, Sanders explained. Emily was digging too deep. She found out they weren't just planning to steal your entire fortune, but they were also involved in money laundering for the Jalisco cartel. My sons, working for drug traffickers. My voice was barely a whisper. Your car dealerships were perfect for laundering money. Fake sales, over-invoicing, ghost customers. Sanders paused. But Emily found the real records. It's all on this drive. And why did I receive messages from her number after she died? She set everything up. She asked me to configure an automated system. If she didn't respond to a certain code within 4 hours, the messages would start being sent. An insurance policy, just in case her suspicions were true. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My Emily, always so smart, so cautious, fighting this conspiracy alone while I, blind with trust, continued to believe in the perfect family we had built. So, what now, Mr. Sanders? Do we go to the police? We can't trust the local police. The chief, Hernandez, has been on your son's payroll for years. We need to go directly to the federal prosecutor's office in the capital. But first, I need irrefutable proof, I said, feeling a cold determination replace the pain. I want confessions. I want to hear from their own mouths why they killed their mother. Sanders looked at me intently. That's dangerous, Mr. Johnson. I'm already dead to them, aren't I? They're just waiting for the right moment. Well, we're going to give them that moment. The plan was simple, but risky. I returned home before my sons, acting like the devastated father they expected to see. When they arrived from the lawyer's office, I noticed a certain tension in their faces. Everything okay with Richard? I asked innocently. Yes, Dad. Just boring paperwork, Charles replied, avoiding my gaze. I'd like to review those documents. After all, she was my wife. Gregory exchanged a quick glance with his brother. Of course, Dad. Maybe tomorrow. You should rest today. Actually, sons, I'd like to talk to you tonight. About the future. About the companies. This immediately caught their attention. Greed shone in their eyes like coins in the sun. Of course, Dad, Charles said, suddenly interested. Whenever you want. After dinner. In my office. I retreated to my room, pretending I needed to rest. In reality, I contacted Sanders on the burner phone. Everything was ready. He and 2 trusted former federal agents would be hidden in the garden, ready to intervene if anything went wrong. Dinner passed in an uncomfortable silence. Rosie, our lifelong cook, had prepared my favorite dish. I didn't take a bite, claiming a lack of appetite. In truth, I was still afraid they might try to poison me. "Let's go to the office," I finally said, getting up from the table. My office was my sanctuary. Dark wood walls, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, my mahogany desk, inherited from my father. In a display case, I kept my collection of antique watches, a passion I shared with Emily. On the desk, photographs of our life together. Our wedding, the birth of Charles, of Gregory, trips, anniversaries. A life I thought was perfect. I sat behind the desk, while my sons took the leather armchairs in front of me. Under my clothes, I wore a small recording device provided by Sanders. "Sons," I began, "I've been thinking a lot since Emily left us. About life, about our legacy." They both nodded with solemn expressions, so well rehearsed they were almost convincing. "I've decided to move forward with the succession of the companies. I want to retire completely." Their faces lit up like Christmas trees. "Are you sure, Dad?" Charles asked, trying to hide his excitement. "It's too soon after, Mom. On the contrary, your mother's death has made me see that life is too short. I want to enjoy my final years without worries." "That's a very wise decision," Gregory intervened, leaning forward. "We'll take care of everything. There's something else," I added, carefully measuring my words. "Emily's life insurance." Richard mentioned it was a considerable sum. They exchanged another quick glance. "Yes, Mom increased the coverage a few months ago," Charles explained. "Almost $5 million. "How strange," I commented, feigning confusion. "Emily never mentioned anything about that to me. She probably wanted to surprise you," Gregory suggested. "You know how Mom was. Always thinking about the future." "Yes, Emily always thought about the future," I repeated, feeling the rage grow inside me. "So much so that she even prepared messages for after her death." The color drained from their faces. Charles sat up straighter in his seat. "What do you mean, Dad?" I took out my phone and showed them the message. "I'm still alive. Trust no one." "That's a sick joke," Gregory stammered. "Someone is using Mom's number. She also left videos," I continued, ignoring his comment. "Interesting videos. Like the one from the back garage on the day she died." Charles stood up, suddenly nervous. "Dad, I think you need to rest. The grief is making you imagine things." "I'm not imagining anything, Charles. I saw the video. I saw the two of you injecting something into your mother. I saw her convulsing on the floor while you watched her die. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife." Gregory stood up too, but not to approach me. He went to check that the door was closed. "You're confused, Dad," Charles said, his voice suddenly cold. "There is no video. The security system saves copies to the cloud. Emily made sure of that." I leaned forward. "Why did you do it? For money? Was your mother's life worth that much?" Gregory looked at Charles, as if waiting for instructions. My firstborn, always the leader, always the one making the decisions, took a deep breath. "You wouldn't understand, Dad. You never have. You built an empire and then decided to give it away to strangers. The charitable foundations. Is that why? You killed your mother because I changed my will?" "You didn't just change it," Charles exploded. "You took what was ours, 50 years building an empire just to hand it out to strangers. Orphaned children, AIDS patients, rural schools. What do they have to do with us? They are people in need, Charles. Your mother and I wanted to leave a legacy beyond just money." "Your wife was on board with us," Gregory chimed in, his voice laced with contempt, "until she found out about the offshore accounts. Then she became a problem. A problem you solved with tetrodotoxin," I said, pronouncing each syllable clearly for the recording. "Pufferfish poison. Hard to get. Even harder to detect." "Where did you get it?" Charles smiled for the first time, a smile I didn't recognize on my son's face. "We have connections, Dad. Connections that you, with your outdated morality, would never understand. The Jalisco cartel," I stated, watching their reactions. "Money laundering through our dealerships. Emily found that out too, didn't she?" "Mom stuck her nose where it didn't belong," Gregory replied, slowly approaching the desk, "just like you are now." In that moment, I understood that the plan had worked too well. My sons were confessing. Yes, but they had also decided it was time to eliminate me. They wouldn't wait any longer. "The dose for you will be larger," Charles said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "We won't make the same mistake we did with Mom. She suffered too much." "You care so much that you'll give me a painless death?" I asked, feeling my voice break for the first time. Is this the love that Emily and I taught you? Love doesn't pay debts, Dad, Gregory answered coldly. And we have a lot of them. Charles pulled a syringe from his pocket. The clear liquid inside glistened under the lamplight. My own death, contained in a glass cylinder. It will be quick, he promised, walking around the desk to get to me. Then they'll find your body, the widower who couldn't bear the loss of his beloved wife. So romantic, so tragic. I pressed the emergency button on the device hidden under my clothes. The signal for Sanders. There's something you should know, I said, buying time. Emily isn't dead. They both stopped, confused. What nonsense are you talking about? Charles snapped. The body you buried wasn't Emily's. It was a decoy. She's in hiding, waiting for the right moment to present all the evidence against you. It was a desperate lie, but it worked. Doubt flickered across their faces. Gregory pulled out his phone. Call the medical examiner, he ordered his brother. Make sure it was her. At that precise moment, the office doors burst open. Michael Sanders and his two partners stormed into the room. Guns drawn, federal agents, on the ground, now. Charles, with the syringe still in his hand, lunged at me. A shot rang out in the room. The bullet hit his shoulder, sending him to the floor, screaming in pain. The syringe rolled away. Gregory, ever the calculator, immediately raised his hands. This is a misunderstanding, he said, in his best lawyer voice. We were just having a family conversation, a conversation about how you killed your mother and were planning to kill your father, Sanders replied, cuffing him. Is it all on tape, Mr. Johnson? I nodded, unable to speak, seeing my sons in handcuffs. Charles bleeding on the floor, Gregory's mask of composure finally shattered. It was an image I had never imagined, not even in my worst nightmares. The next few hours passed in a fever dream. Federal agents swarmed my house. The phone wouldn't stop ringing. Richard, business partners, friends who had seen the patrol cars. The news spread through the city like wildfire. The sons of businessman William Johnson, arrested for the murder of their father. Sitting in the kitchen, a cup of coffee growing cold in my hands, I listened as Sanders coordinated the operation. Emily's body would be exhumed for a real autopsy. My sons' bank accounts, frozen, their accomplices, identified and pursued. Mr. Johnson, Sanders said, sitting across from me. You did an incredible job in there. Your wife would be proud. My wife is dead, I replied mechanically, and my sons are murderers. I have nothing to be proud of. You have justice. And that's something? Justice. A cold word. Insufficient. What good was justice when everything I loved was destroyed? My family, my legacy, my entire life. It had all turned to ash in a matter of days. What happens now? I asked. Your sons will face charges for premeditated murder, attempted murder, forgery, fraud, and money laundering. They won't see the light of day again. He paused. As for their partners in the cartel, that's another matter. More complex. More dangerous. Am I in danger? Temporarily, yes. The cartel won't appreciate their laundering operations being exposed. We'll have to move you to a secure location while we complete the investigation. A secure location, far from the house I had built with Emily, far from the memories, far from everything that had been my life for nearly 70 years. Can I visit her grave first? I asked, feeling the long-suppressed tears begin to flow. I need to say goodbye. Sanders nodded. Early tomorrow, with an escort. That night, alone in my room, guarded by federal agents, I looked at the family photos on my nightstand. Charles and Gregory as children, smiling, innocent. At what point did they become monsters? When did ambition devour their humanity? Was it my fault? Did I give them too much or too little? My phone vibrated. One last message from Emily's number. When it's all over, look in the lake house. I love you, E. The lake house. Our secret getaway. A small cabin we bought decades ago, before the business expanded, before the money, when we were just a young couple in love with 2 small children. I didn't mention the message to Sanders. Some things had to remain between Emily and me. The cemetery was quiet that morning. Dew covered the tombstones like the earth's tears. 2 federal agents escorted me, keeping a respectful distance as I knelt before Emily's grave. I kept my promise, my love, I whispered, placing white roses on the cold marble. Those responsible will pay. But at what cost? Our family is destroyed. The wind rustled the leaves in the trees, as if Emily were answering from somewhere beyond my understanding. I don't know how to go on without you. Without them? I'm alone now. I traced my fingers over her name carved in the stone. Emily Martinez Johnson, 1955 to 2025. Beloved wife and mother. The irony of that last word was unbearable now. As I stood up, I noticed something unusual, a small crack in the headstone just below her name. Examining it closer, I saw it wasn't a natural crack. Someone had etched, with some fine instrument, a tiny message. LH0522, Lake House. May Tuktavand, 5 days after her death. My heart raced. What did this mean? Another message from Emily, prepared before she died, or something more impossible, more unthinkable? I said nothing to the agents. Some answers I had to find alone. 3 weeks later, the case was in full swing. The exhumation confirmed the presence of tetrodotoxin in Emily's body. The offshore accounts were traced. The connection to the cartel was exposed. Charles and Gregory, held in preventive custody, had pleaded not guilty despite the recordings. Richard Miller, my lifelong lawyer, turned out to be involved as well. He had forged documents and helped launder money. I was now living in a safe apartment in the city, under federal protection. My business empire was in the hands of temporary administrators while the legal situation was sorted out. My life on pause. On May 20th, I requested permission to visit our cabin at the lake. I need to retrieve personal documents, I explained. They assigned 2 agents as my escort. The cabin was just as I remembered it. Small, cozy, with its wooden dock stretching out over the lake. We had been happy here, truly happy, before money and ambition tainted everything. I need a few minutes alone, I asked the agents, who nodded and remained outside, watching the surroundings. Inside, time seemed to have stood still. The same rustic furniture, the same photos on the walls, the same smell of wood and memories. I searched everywhere. Closets, drawers, under the floorboards. Nothing. Finally, I went to the small attic, accessible only by a folding ladder in the ceiling. There, among boxes of memories and old clothes, I found a sealed manila envelope, my name, written in Emily's unmistakable handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened it. Inside was a letter, a small key, and a recent photograph. The photo showed a White House with a red-tiled roof, surrounded by trees. I didn't recognize it. I began to read the letter. My dearest William, if you are reading this, it means you found my messages, and things have gone according to plan. I am so deeply sorry for the pain you must be feeling now. What I am about to tell you will seem impossible, but you must believe me. I discovered our son's plans months ago. Not just the theft, not just the money laundering. I found out they were planning to kill us both. I hired Michael Sanders to investigate, but I also made my own preparations. I knew they were coming for me first. I heard them discussing it one night in Charles's office when they thought I was asleep. On May 8th, when you traveled out of state, I put my plan into motion. The woman you buried was not me, William. She was Maria Dolores Vasquez, a terminally ill patient from the hospital where I volunteer. No family, no one to claim her. She passed away that morning from natural causes. I paid the hospital director and the morgue attendant to falsify the records. Her body was taken to our house. I went into hiding. I watched from a distance as Charles and Gregory discovered the body. How they faked their grief, how they prepared for your return and the sham of the funeral. I am alive, William, hiding in a small town in Portugal, where no one knows me. The address is on the back of this letter. The key is to our new house. I know it's a lot to ask. I know it seems insane. But if you still love me, if you can forgive me for this necessary lie, come to me. We'll start over, far from all the horror our sons created. With eternal love, Emily. I reread the letter again and again, unable to process its contents. Emily alive? Another woman's body in her grave? It was too fantastic, too unbelievable. And yet, the text messages, the inscription on the headstone, this letter in her unmistakable hand. I turned the paper over. An address in Sintra, Portugal. A small town known for its palaces and lush gardens. A place where 2 old people could disappear and start over. The world I thought I knew had completely fallen apart. My sons were murderers. My wife, supposedly dead, might be alive on the other side of the ocean. My entire life. An elaborate lie. What was I supposed to do? Inform the authorities? Keep the secret? Fly to Portugal to find out the truth? I put the letter in my pocket and climbed down from the attic. The agents were still waiting outside, oblivious to the earthquake that had just shaken my existence. Did you find what you were looking for, Mr. Johnson? one of them asked. Yes, I replied, feeling a decision begin to form inside me. I found exactly what I needed. Back at the safe apartment, I sat by the window, watching the city spread out below at sunset. In my hand, the small key Emily had left in the envelope. In my mind, 1,000 unanswered questions. If Emily was really alive, why not contact the authorities directly? Why the elaborate charade? Why allow another woman to be buried in her place? The answer, painful but clear, was the same one that explained my son's actions. Fear. Emily had discovered that our own children were planning to murder us. Who could she trust with such a horror? Who would believe her? Worse, who would protect her when the murderers were the respected heirs to the Johnson Empire, with connections all over the city? Her plan, though extreme, had worked. It had exposed our sons. It had protected my life. And now, it offered me a way out. A second chance. My phone rang. It was Sanders. "Mr. Johnson, we have a problem. Charles has managed to communicate with his cartel contacts from prison. They've put a price on your head." "How much am I worth to my own son?" I asked with bitter irony. $1 million. We're going to have to move you again, maybe out of the country. Out of the country, as if fate itself were conspiring to push me towards Emily. "I need a few days to arrange some personal matters," I replied. "After that, I'll be ready to go. I'll assign you additional protection in the meantime." "Be careful, Mr. Johnson. These people won't stop at anything." I hung up, feeling a strange calm wash over me. Difficult decisions sometimes bring an unexpected clarity. I took out the photograph of the house in Portugal, a white home under a warm sun, a new beginning. The question was, did I deserve that new beginning? Could I live with the lie, with the deceit, even if it was for protection? And more importantly, could I forgive Emily for allowing another woman to be buried in her place, for orchestrating this elaborate sham, for not trusting me enough to share her suspicions from the start? Night fell over the city as I continued to stare at the photograph, the key, and the impossible future that lay before me. A future built on ashes, on lies, on betrayals. A future that, despite everything, held the only light that had ever guided my path. Emily. The decision kept me awake all night. The safe apartment, with guards posted at the door, felt like a gilded cage. In my hand, the key to a house in Portugal. In my heart, a storm of conflicting emotions. At dawn, I picked up the burner phone Sanders had given me and dialed a number I had never used before. "I need to get out of the country," I said when he answered. Without anyone knowing, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. "You found something at the lake house, didn't you?" His voice sounded tired, resigned. "You knew?" I asked, feeling rage ignite within me. "You knew Emily is alive." Another silence. "I suspected it," he finally admitted. "There were inconsistencies in the autopsy. The body didn't exactly match your wife's medical records. But I had no proof, and you needed justice." "Justice?" The word tasted bitter in my mouth. "What justice is there in this, Sanders? An innocent woman is buried in my wife's grave, and my sons are in prison for a murder they didn't commit." "Your sons tried to kill you," he reminded me harshly. "They stole millions. They laundered money for drug traffickers. Maybe they didn't kill your wife, but they are criminals who deserve to be where they are." He was right, of course. Charles and Gregory had revealed their true nature that night in my office. The syringe filled with poison had not been a hallucination. Their confession, recorded and clear, left no room for doubt. "Help me leave the country," I insisted. "After that, you can do what you think is right with the information about Emily." "Are you sure she's waiting for you?" Sanders asked, his voice softer now. "It's been weeks. If she's really in Portugal, she might have left by now." Doubt pierced my mind like a thorn. What if it was all another trap? What if I arrived in Sintra only to find an empty house and more unanswered questions? "I have to know," I finally replied. "I need to see her, to hear her side, to understand." "I'll get you documents and a private flight," Sanders conceded. "But when you get there, you'll be on your own. I won't be able to protect you." "I've been on my own since I got that first message at the funeral," I said with bitter irony. "I just didn't know it." 48 hours later, I landed in Lisbon with a fake passport and a new identity. Hector Miller, a retired businessman on a leisure trip. Sanders had kept his word, facilitating my departure from the country without alerting official authorities. From Lisbon to Sintra, a journey of just half an hour by road. I hired a taxi, feeling my heart accelerate with every mile that brought us closer to the address Emily had left. Sintra was like a fairy tale. Colorful palaces perched on green hills, lush gardens, cobblestone streets winding between centuries-old buildings. A perfect place to disappear, to reinvent oneself. The taxi dropped me at the end of a rural road. From there, according to the directions, I had to walk about 200 yards to the house. The air smelled of eucalyptus and damp earth. In the distance, the Atlantic Ocean shimmered under the afternoon sun, and then I saw it, exactly like the photograph. A white house with red tiles, surrounded by flowering trees and a small vegetable garden. A column of smoke rose from the chimney. Someone was inside. I stopped, suddenly terrified. What would I say? What would I do? How do you greet a wife who faked her own death? Before I could decide, the door of the house opened, and there she was, my Emily. Thinner, her hair now completely white, but unmistakably her. Alive, breathing, real. Our eyes met across the distance. Her eyes widened. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a cry. "William!" Her voice, barely a whisper carried to me by the wind. I walked towards her as if in a trance, unable to speak, to think. When I was a few feet away, I stopped. I had rehearsed 1,000 accusations, 1,000 questions, 1,000 reproaches. But standing before her, alive, they all vanished. "You're here," she said, tears streaming down her cheeks, etched by time and worry. "You really came." "I had to see you," I replied, my voice breaking. I had to know if it was true. Emily held out a trembling hand. I took it in mine, feeling its warmth, its pulse, the undeniable proof of her existence. "Forgive me," she pleaded, "for everything. For the lie. For leaving you to face our sons alone. For— Why, Emily?" The question escaped my throat like a scream held back for too long. "Why didn't you trust me?" She looked down, her shoulders slumping under the weight of secrets too heavy to bear. "Come inside," she said simply. "There's a lot to explain." The house inside was simple but cozy. Rustic furniture, a few plants, books, a home built in a hurry but with the intention of permanence. On the wall, a single photograph, the two of us, young, smiling, in front of our first house. "When I found out what our sons were planning," Emily began, pouring tea into ceramic cups, "I wanted to tell you immediately. But then I found this." She pulled a notebook from a drawer. I recognized it instantly. Charles's personal planner. She handed it to me, open to a specific page. There, in my firstborn's neat handwriting, a terrifying plan was detailed. "Dad is getting suspicious. Too many questions about the new contracts. If he finds out the truth, we'll lose everything. Plan B is in motion." "Plan B was to eliminate both of us," Emily explained. "But they were afraid that if you died first, the authorities would suspect something. I was the initial target. Then, when you were devastated by my loss, vulnerable, a tragic accident, or a suicide due to depression would follow. Why didn't you go to the police?" I tried. Her voice hardened. "I went to see Commissioner Hernandez. He listened patiently, and then he called Charles while I was still in his office. He told him his paranoid mother was making up conspiracies." The horror of her situation began to dawn on me. Alone, with no one to trust, not even her husband, as warning me could have accelerated our son's murderous plans. "I hired Sanders," Emily continued, "a former Fed, no connection to the local police. He started investigating discreetly, but time was running out. Charles and Gregory were getting more impatient, more careless. I heard them arguing about dates, about methods, about alibis. And so you decided." I couldn't finish the sentence. The enormity of her decision left me speechless. "To disappear," she completed, "to give them what they wanted. My death. But on my terms. Controlled, documented. A trap that would eventually expose them. Maria Dolores Vasquez," I said, remembering the name from the letter. "The woman we buried." Emily nodded, her eyes clouding with sorrow. "A terminal patient. No family, no one to mourn her. I promised her that her body would not be forgotten, that it would rest in a place where it would receive flowers and prayers. It's not a good enough justification, I know." I stood up, unable to remain seated under the weight of these revelations. I walked to the window, looking out at the flowering garden under the Portuguese sun. A paradise built on deceit. "Our sons tried to kill me, Emily, with the same tetrodotoxin they supposedly used on you. They're in prison now, facing life for your murder." "I know," she replied quietly. "Sanders kept me informed. It wasn't the original plan, but—" "But what?" I turned to her, feeling anger replace the initial shock. "What did you think would happen?" That they would confess to other crimes, but not your murder? I thought you would be safe, she answered, her eyes filled with tears. That the evidence Sanders was gathering would be enough to lock them up for fraud, for money laundering. I never imagined they would try to kill you so soon, so openly. But they did. And now they're being tried for a crime they didn't commit. A crime they would have committed if they'd had the chance, Emily retorted, a flash of hardness in her eyes. Are you defending them now, William, after what they tried to do to you? The question hit me like a slap. No, I wasn't defending them. My son's betrayal was unforgivable. The syringe in Charles's hand, the coldness in his eyes as he prepared to kill me, those memories were real. That guilt was undeniable. What do we do now? I finally asked, sitting back down across from her. Do we live here, in hiding, while the world thinks you're dead and I'm missing? While our sons are convicted for a murder that didn't happen? I don't know, Emily admitted, reaching across the table to take my hand. I only know that we're together now, and that together, as always, we'll find a way. I looked at her, really looked at her. At 68 years old, I thought I had known every facet of love and pain, but this was unexplored territory. My wife had faked her own death. She had allowed another woman to occupy her grave. She had left me alone to face the most devastating betrayal imaginable. All to protect me. All for love. Was it justifiable? I didn't know. Was it forgivable? Maybe. In time. Did I still love her? Without a single doubt. I missed you every minute, I finally said, squeezing her hand. When I thought I had lost you, a part of me died with you. I missed you too, she replied, her eyes shining with unshed tears. Every sunrise without you was a small death. We sat like that, in silence, as the sun began to set over Sintra, painting the sky in oranges and purples. Two old people, united by an impossible love, separated by a necessary deception, reunited by a relentless fate. Truth and lies, love and betrayal, justice and survival. All those lines had blurred until they were unrecognizable. The only certain thing, the only real thing, was our hands clasped on that table, in a white house in Portugal, far from everything we had ever known. And for now, that would have to be enough. The first month in Portugal passed in a strange emotional limbo. Emily and I, reunited but distant, sharing a roof but each carrying the weight of our own decisions. In the mornings, we walked to the village, buying fresh bread and fruit, exchanging polite greetings with neighbors who knew us as the retired couple. In the afternoons, we worked in the small garden or read in silence. At night, we slept in separate rooms, the abyss between us still too wide to be crossed. One morning at breakfast, Emily placed a newspaper in front of me. A newspaper from home, obtained from an international press shop in Lisbon. Charles killed himself in prison, she said in a neutral voice, though her hands trembled slightly. I read the article in silence. My firstborn son, the brilliant lawyer, the manipulator, the one who held the poison-filled syringe that night in my office, had hanged himself with his bedsheets. It left no note. He asked for no forgiveness. I felt a dull ache in my chest. Despite everything, he was still my son, the little boy I once carried on my shoulders, whom I taught to ride a bike, whose victories I celebrated and whose tears I dried. Gregory knows now, Emily added, pointing to a smaller article. He confessed to everything during his brother's funeral. The fraud, the money laundering, the attempted murder against you. Everything except my death, because now he knows it didn't happen. How? Sanders showed him proof. My passport used to leave the country. Recent photographs. He offered him a deal, a full confession in exchange for a reduced sentence. And the authorities? What do they know? Officially, I'm still dead. The exhumation revealed the body wasn't mine, but the official explanation is that there was a mix-up at the morgue, a tragic administrative error. Sanders took care of it. And me? Missing. Possibly eliminated by the cartel, though without a body to confirm it. Another unsolved case in a country full of them. So there we were, dead to the world, ghosts walking under the Portuguese sun, existing in a liminal space between truth and lies. The change came gradually, like the spring that was beginning to bloom in our garden. One afternoon, while Emily was pruning the rose bushes she had planted when she arrived, I sat beside her and asked, "What was she like?" "Who?" "Maria Dolores, the woman in your grave." Emily paused, the shears suspended in midair. She was a retired teacher. Terminal cancer. No children, no siblings. She would tell me about her students while I read to her in the afternoons at the hospital. She paused, her eyes lost in memory. When I told her my plan, she didn't hesitate. "At least my body will be useful for something good," she said. "But promise me you won't forget me." "Do you see her in your dreams?" I asked, remembering how Emily sometimes talked in her sleep, asking an unseen person for forgiveness. "Every night," she confessed, returning to her roses. "I tell her about this garden, about us, about the justice she helped bring." That night, for the first time since I arrived, we slept in the same bed. There was no passion, only the quiet comfort of two survivors, clinging to each other in the darkness. A year later, we received news that Gregory had been sentenced to 20 years in prison, not for my supposed murder, nor for his mother's, but for fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. The Johnson Empire had been liquidated, its assets distributed among creditors and charitable causes, just as Emily and I had originally planned. It was then that we made our decision. We couldn't keep living in the shadows, trapped between two worlds. Emily wrote a long letter to Sanders, revealing the whole truth, taking full responsibility. I added my signature at the end. I was ready to face the consequences with her. The reply came 3 weeks later. "Some secrets are best left buried. Live your lives, justice has already been served." And so we did. We legally adopted our new identities. We bought a larger house on the coast. We planted a garden of white roses that Emily named the Garden of Maria Dolores. We started teaching Spanish to local children. We built, step by step, a new life. It has been 5 years since that funeral where I received the message that changed everything. Today, as I write these lines on our porch facing the Atlantic, Emily is napping in the hammock. At 75, she is still the bravest woman I have ever known. At 73, I have learned that love is not just about tenderness and companionship, but also about forgiveness and reinvention. We never went back. We never visited the grave where Maria Dolores rests under my wife's name. We never saw Gregory serve his sentence. Those doors are closed forever. But every night, before we sleep, we light a candle and say a prayer for everyone. For Charles, who chose death over redemption. For Gregory, paying for his crimes in solitude. For Maria Dolores, the stranger who gave us this second chance. And for ourselves, two old people who found peace after the storm. Sometimes, our neighbors ask why two elderly people decided to start over in a foreign country, far from everything familiar. Emily always answers with a smile, because it's never too late to be reborn, and she's right. In the twilight of our lives, when most are preparing for the end, we found a new beginning. A bitter miracle, built on necessary deceptions and painful truths, but a miracle nonetheless. The message I received that day at the funeral, those impossible words that changed the course of everything, turned out to be the purest truth in a world of lies. I'm still alive. Trust no one. And it was true. Emily was still alive. And in a world where our own sons had conspired to kill us, trust had become a luxury we couldn't afford, except with each other. Between us, trust was reborn, like the white roses in our garden, stronger after the pruning, more beautiful after the storm. This is our story, a story of betrayal and redemption, of death and rebirth, the story of how I lost my family, my country, and my name, but found in exile and forgiveness a peace I never thought possible. And if there is a lesson in all of this, it is that life, even in its darkest moments, always holds surprises, some devastating, others miraculous. The trick is to keep breathing, to keep loving, to keep living until you find out which one is waiting for you around the corner. In my case, it was an impossible message on a phone during a funeral. In yours? Who knows? But keep your eyes open and your heart ready. You never know when life will send you your own message from beyond.
At my son's funeral, his wife threw me out of my own house. I'm Thomas Mitchell. What happened next changed everything. Picture this. Your child just died. You're grieving, and your daughter-in-law looks you in the eye and says, "Stop crying, pack your bags, and get out of my house now." She called me a worthless burden, in front of everyone, at my son's funeral. But here's what Victoria didn't know. The house she was kicking me out of? I built it in 1987. The money she thought she inherited? $850,000 that was always mine. For 8 years, she lived off my generosity while treating me like charity. Instead of arguing, I just walked away. Sometimes silence is the most powerful response of all. If you're new here, hit subscribe. I share stories about standing up to disrespect, and trust me, you'll want to see how this ends. Because what Victoria discovered 3 days later taught both of us that assumptions can cost you everything. Let me start from the beginning. The signs were there from the beginning. I just chose to ignore them. When my son David died in that car accident 2 months ago, Victoria immediately took charge. "Don't worry about the arrangements, Tom," she said. "I'll handle everything." What she really meant was, stay out of my way. At the funeral home, she made every decision. The casket, the flowers, even the music. When I suggested David's favorite song, the one we used to play when we built this house together in 1987, she cut me off. "That's too depressing," Victoria said. "We need something more uplifting." I watched her command the room in her $300 black dress, directing everyone like she was the director of this tragic play. And me? I sat in my old gray suit, the one I'd worn to my wife's funeral 2 years earlier, feeling invisible. The second sign came during the reception at our house. My house, technically, though Victoria had been treating it like hers since David's death. She pulled me aside in the kitchen. "Tom, we need to talk about your situation." "My situation?" "You're financially dependent on us now. David was supporting you, and with him gone." She shrugged. "I can't carry that burden." Burden. That word hit harder than expected. "I've been more than generous letting you stay here," she continued. "But this house is mine now. Everything is mine. David left it all to me." I nodded slowly. Victoria saw that nod as defeat. What she didn't see was calculation. She had no idea that David had never owned this house. He lived here, yes. Grew up here, absolutely. But owned it? Never. She also didn't know about the filing cabinet in the basement. 4 drawers of meticulously organized financial records going back 40 years. The CPA and me never threw anything away. Most importantly, she didn't know about the trust. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The funeral guests saw what Victoria wanted them to see. A successful real estate agent taking charge during a family crisis, and an old man who couldn't handle his own affairs. They watched her shake hands and accept condolences like she was the head of the family now. Meanwhile, I sat quietly in David's old recliner, the one I'd bought him for his 16th birthday, and listened to her paint me as the dependent father-in-law. "Tom's having a hard time adjusting," I heard her tell our neighbor Helen Davis. "The poor man doesn't understand finances. David handled everything for him." Helen shot me a sympathetic look. She'd known me for 37 years, since the day I broke ground on this lot. But even she seemed to believe Victoria's version of reality. That's when I realized something important. People see what they expect to see. Victoria expected to see a grieving widower who couldn't manage on his own, so that's what she saw. The old Honda Civic I drove instead of something flashy. The simple clothes I wore instead of expensive suits. The quiet way I handled my grief instead of making a show of it. She mistook humility for helplessness, quiet for weak, generous for desperate. It was an understandable mistake. I'd spent 2 years since my wife Margaret's death living simply. No need for expensive toys or status symbols when you're learning to live alone. David understood that. He respected my choice to downsize my lifestyle. But Victoria? She measured worth by appearance, by volume, by who controlled the conversation. She was about to learn that the most dangerous person in any room is the one who doesn't need to prove anything. As the last guest left that Tuesday evening, Victoria cornered me by the front door. "I meant what I said, Tom. This arrangement isn't working anymore." I looked around the living room I'd painted 3 times over the decades. The hardwood floors I'd installed by hand. The crown molding I'd measured and cut with David when he was 12. "I understand," I said quietly, but Victoria had no idea what I understood, and she definitely had no idea what was coming next. Wednesday morning brought clarity and coffee in equal measure. I sat at my kitchen table, the one Margaret and I had bought at a garage sale in 1986, and made a list. Not of what I was losing, but of what Victoria thought she was gaining. The house, 2,400 square feet of memories on Maple Street in suburban Cleveland. Current market value, according to Victoria's own real estate expertise, $420,000. The life insurance, David's policy through his engineering firm, $150,000. Victoria had already started spending that money in her head. The furniture, everything from Margaret's antique china cabinet to David's collection of engineering textbooks, not valuable to others but priceless to me. My dignity, watching Victoria parade around like she'd inherited a kingdom when she'd actually inherited nothing at all. But here's what really bothered me. It wasn't the money or even the house. It was the erasure. Victoria was systematically removing every trace of the life Margaret and I had built here. She'd already boxed up Margaret's photos from the mantel. David's childhood drawings were gone from the refrigerator. Even my old CPA certificates had disappeared from the den wall. "I'm redecorating," she explained when I asked about Margaret's photos. "David always said this place needed updating." Updating, as if 40 years of memories were outdated software. She gave me 30 days. 30 days to find somewhere else to live on what she assumed was Social Security and nothing else. 30 days to pack up 4 decades and pretend it never happened. The cruelest part? She was doing it all with such confidence, such certainty that she held all the cards. Tuesday afternoon, she'd handed me a printed timeline. Actually printed it out, like I was a tenant getting evicted. "November 15th, she said, pointing to the date circled in red. "That gives you time to find a nice senior community, somewhere more appropriate for your situation." Your situation. There was that phrase again. "I've already looked into a few places," she continued, pulling out brochures like she was doing me a favor. "Sunset Manor has openings. It's only $800 a month for a studio apartment." $800 a month. She expected me to spend my entire Social Security check on rent and somehow survive on nothing else. "What about food?" I asked. "Transportation? Medical bills?" She shrugged. "There are programs for people in your situation. Food stamps, Medicaid. The government takes care of senior citizens." The government. Like I was some charity case who'd never contributed anything to society. That's when I realized Victoria didn't just want me gone. She wanted me grateful for the opportunity to leave. She wanted me to thank her for 30 days instead of 0. To appreciate her generosity in not calling the police to have me removed immediately. To accept that this was simply how things worked now that David was gone. But Wednesday morning, sitting with my coffee and my list, I had a different realization. Victoria had made one critical assumption, that David owned everything she was claiming. She'd been married to him for 8 years. She'd lived in this house for 8 years. She'd probably never seen a deed or a mortgage statement or any document that proved ownership of anything. Why would she? David handled the finances, just like his mother and I had taught him. The man takes care of the money. Old-fashioned maybe, but it worked for us. Except David had never actually handled my finances. He'd helped me around the house, sure. Brought groceries when I needed them. Drove me to doctor appointments after Margaret died. But the money? The investments? The property? That was always mine to manage. Victoria saw David's helpfulness and assumed dependency. She saw my gratitude and assumed obligation. She saw 2 years of quiet grief and assumed defeat. If I said nothing, if I just packed my bags and shuffled off to Sunset Manor like a good little senior citizen, what message would that send? That bullies win. That volume beats truth. That if you're loud enough and confident enough, you can rewrite history and steal someone's life. That respect is optional when you're dealing with old people. That my 40 years of marriage to Margaret meant nothing. That the house we built together was just bricks and wood. That the son we raised here could be forgotten as easily as photos removed from a mantle. The stakes weren't just financial, they were existential. But I had something Victoria didn't know about, something that would change everything. I just needed to find the right moment to use it, and that moment was coming sooner than she thought. Thursday morning, Victoria let herself into my house with David's key. I was having breakfast when I heard the front door open. No knock, no good morning. She walked in like she owned the place, which, in her mind, she did. "Tom, we need to talk," she announced, marching into the kitchen with a manila folder under her arm. "About what?" "Your finances." She sat down across from me without being invited. "I've been thinking about your situation, and I need to understand exactly what David was covering for you." I took a sip of coffee. "Such as?" "The utilities, the property taxes, the insurance." She opened her folder and pulled out a legal pad covered in her handwriting. "David never told me the exact amounts, but I need to know so I can budget properly." "Budget for what?" "For taking over those payments, obviously." She looked at me like I was slow. "Until you move out, I'll have to cover everything David was covering for you." I set down my coffee cup. "And what exactly do you think David was covering?" "Everything. The mortgage, the taxes, the electric bill. You're on a fixed income, Tom. Social Security doesn't stretch that far." "Is that what David told you?" Victoria's pen stopped moving. "What do you mean?" "I mean, did David specifically tell you he was paying my bills?" "He didn't have to tell me. It's obvious." She gestured around the kitchen. "How else could you afford to live here? This house is worth over $400,000. And how do you know what it's worth?" "I'm a real estate agent, Tom. I know property values in this neighborhood."
But you've never seen the deed. The question hung in the air like smoke. Victoria's confident expression flickered for just a moment. I don't need to see the deed. David inherited this house when your wife died. Did he? Of course he did. Who else would get it? I stood up slowly and walked to the sink, rinsing my coffee cup with deliberate care. You know, Victoria, you've made a lot of assumptions about my finances. They're not assumptions. They're facts. Really? What other facts do you have? She consulted her legal pad. David told me you never contributed a dime to this house. I turned around. Is that what David told you? Yes. Interesting. Because I built this house in 1987, paid cash for the lot, hired the contractors, supervised every day of construction. Victoria's face tightened. That was 37 years ago. Things change. Some things, not ownership. Look, Tom, I know this is hard for you. Losing David, having to face reality about your financial situation, but denial won't help. What denial? Pretending you're not dependent on family charity. The word charity landed like a slap. I dried my hands on the dish towel, taking my time. Victoria, let me ask you something. What? In 8 years of marriage, did David ever show you a mortgage statement? We kept our finances separate. Did he ever mention making house payments? We didn't discuss every detail of his expenses. Did you ever see him write a check for property taxes? Her silence was answer enough. Here's what I think happened, I said, leaning against the counter. David helped me around the house, picked up groceries, did some yard work, and you assumed that meant he was supporting me financially. Because that's what it looked like. Appearances can be deceiving. Victoria stood up, clearly frustrated. Fine. Show me the deed then. Prove you own this house. I don't have to prove anything to you. Yes, you do, because I'm David's widow and I inherited everything. Did you? Stop answering questions with questions. Stop making assumptions. We stared at each other across the kitchen. Victoria's jaw was tight, her real estate agent composure cracking. You have until November 15th, she said finally. After that, I'm changing the locks. We'll see about that. She gathered her papers and headed for the door. We'll see about what? But I just smiled and started loading the dishwasher. Some conversations are better finished with lawyers present. Friday afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I went down to the basement. The basement had always been my sanctuary. Margaret used to joke that I was like a squirrel down there, storing away every document and receipt like they were acorns for winter. You never know when you'll need proof of something, I'd tell her. She'd roll her eyes and remind me that normal people didn't keep 40 years of bank statements. But I wasn't normal people. I was a CPA who'd learned early that paper trails tell stories, and stories protect you when memories fail or people lie. The filing cabinet stood exactly where I'd left it. 4 drawers of meticulous organization, each drawer labeled by decade. Each file folder labeled by category, each document filed chronologically. It was beautiful in its own way. I pulled out the bottom drawer first, 1980s. The decade that changed everything. Inside, I found the folder I was looking for. Real estate, 447 Maple Street. Yes, 447. The house number Victoria thought she now owned. The first document was the original land purchase agreement. March 12, 1987. Thomas Mitchell, buyer. $43,000 for the lot. The second document was the construction contract. Mitchell & Sons Building Company. No relation to me, just a coincidence of names. $78,000 for a custom colonial. The third document was the most important, the original deed. Recorded March 15, 1987. Owner, Thomas Mitchell. No cosigner, no joint ownership, no mortgage. I'd paid cash for everything. Victoria had no idea, of course. She'd been 4 years old in 1987, probably learning to tie her shoes while I was learning to read blueprints. But there was more in that folder. Much more. Insurance policies. Property tax receipts. Utility connection agreements. All in my name. All paid by me. All proving continuous ownership for 37 years. David's name appeared nowhere in any of these documents. I pulled out the second drawer. 1990s. More of the same. Property taxes paid annually by Thomas Mitchell. Insurance premiums paid quarterly by Thomas Mitchell. Even the landscaping receipts were in my name. The 2000s drawer told the same story, and the 2010 S, and the most recent file from 2024. But the real surprise was in the very back of the bottom drawer, in a folder labeled Trust Documents. Private. This was the folder Victoria definitely didn't know about.
Inside were papers that would change everything, documents that told a story she couldn't imagine. The first paper was a trust agreement, dated June 15th, 1985, before David was even born. The Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust. The second paper was a bank statement from First National Bank of Ohio. Current balance as of October 31st, 2024, $853,412. The third paper was a list of trust beneficiaries. David's name was there, yes, but not as an inheritor, as a beneficiary during his lifetime, with specific terms and conditions. Terms and conditions that Victoria had never bothered to ask about. The trust was complicated, the way these things always are. But the basic structure was simple. Margaret and I were the original trustees. After Margaret's death, I became the sole trustee. David received monthly allowances for education, housing assistance, and family support. But ownership? That always remained with the trust, which meant it remained with me. David had lived comfortably because I made sure he lived comfortably. The engineering degree I helped pay for, the wedding I helped fund, the various investments and opportunities that came his way. All of it flowed from this trust. All of it remained under my control. Victoria saw David's comfortable lifestyle and assumed he was independently wealthy. She saw his generosity toward me and assumed it came from his own earnings. She never imagined that the money flowing from David to me was actually my own money flowing back home. It's funny how assumptions work. You see what fits your expectations and ignore what doesn't. Victoria expected successful young couples to support their aging parents. So when she saw David helping me, she assumed dependency. She never considered the possibility that I was helping him, but there was one more document in that folder. One that would matter most when the time came for truth-telling. David's life insurance policy. $150,000, just like Victoria said. But the beneficiary wasn't Victoria. The beneficiary was the Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust, which meant the beneficiary was me. Victoria had been spending money that was never hers to begin with, making plans with resources that belonged to someone else, building a future on a foundation that didn't exist. I closed the filing cabinet and headed back upstairs. In the kitchen, I made myself a sandwich and thought about timing. Victoria had given me until November 15th to move out. Today was November 1st. That gave me exactly 2 weeks to decide how to handle this situation. I could call her right now, explain the truth, show her the documents, watch her world collapse in real time. Or I could wait. Let her keep making assumptions. Let her dig the hole deeper. Let her learn the lesson the hard way. As I ate my sandwich, I remembered something my old business partner used to say. Tom, sometimes the best negotiation strategy is letting the other guy talk himself into a corner. Victoria was definitely talking herself into a corner. The question was, how deep did I want to let her dig before I stopped her? I looked around the kitchen I'd designed 37 years ago. The cabinets I'd chosen, the countertops I'd installed, the windows I'd measured and ordered, my house, my trust, my choice. Victoria was about to learn that respect isn't negotiable, but first she needed to finish digging. Sunday morning brought the worst of Victoria. I was getting ready for church when she arrived with 3 of her real estate agent friends. She'd invited them for what she called a consultation about the house's potential. I heard them before I saw them. Victoria's voice carrying through the front door. This place has incredible bones, but the decor is so outdated. Classic old person style, you know? They walked through my house like it was already theirs. Oh my God, Victoria, this crown molding is gorgeous, said a blonde woman in expensive boots. Original? From 1987, Victoria replied. Tom built this place, but he has no eye for modern design. Look at this wallpaper, and that furniture. It's like a museum. I stood at the top of the stairs listening to them catalog my life's work like it was a garage sale. The bones are definitely there, said another woman, but you'll need to gut the kitchen. Those cabinets are so 80s. Already planning on it, Victoria said. Tom will be moving to a senior community soon, so I'll have full control over renovations. Full control. Over my kitchen. The one Margaret and I had planned together for 6 months. I came downstairs wearing my church clothes. 3 women I'd never met were standing in my living room taking photos. Tom! Victoria's voice was artificially bright. Perfect timing. I want you to meet some colleagues. She introduced them like I was a curiosity. This is Tom, David's father. He's the original owner, but he's transitioning to a more suitable living situation. Transitioning. Like I was a job change. Mr. Mitchell, said the blonde one, your house has such character. You must have put a lot of work into it. Some, I said. Victoria tells us you're moving to Sunset Manor. That's such a nice facility. I looked at Victoria. Is that what I'm doing? We discussed this, Tom, November 15th, remember? I remember you discussing it. An uncomfortable silence settled over the group. The real estate agents exchanged glances. Well, said the blonde one, we should probably let you get to church. Actually, Victoria said, Tom, while everyone's here, maybe you could tell them about the maintenance issues, the roof leak, the furnace problems? There was no roof leak. The furnace was 2 years old. I'm not aware of any maintenance issues, I said carefully. Tom, you know the upstairs bathroom faucet drips, and the basement gets damp in the spring. The faucet needs a 50-cent washer. The basement has been dry for 20 years. Victoria's smile tightened. Tom's very attached to this place. Sometimes he doesn't see problems that are obvious to others. Problems like what? I asked. Like the fact that you can't afford to maintain a house this size anymore. The room went quiet. Even the real estate agents looked uncomfortable. Can't afford it? I asked. Tom, we've been through this. Your Social Security barely covers basic living expenses. And you know this how? Because I'm not blind. You drive a 15-year-old Honda. You shop with coupons. You haven't updated anything in this house since the Clinton administration. One of the agents cleared her throat. Maybe we should reschedule this tour? No, it's fine, Victoria said. Tom understands this situation. He's had 2 years to adjust to reality since Margaret died. What reality is that? I asked. That you're a 70-year-old man on a fixed income who can't handle a 2,400 square foot house anymore. 70? 68? Whatever. The point is you're making assumptions about my finances. They're not assumptions, Tom. They're observations. Observations about what? About the fact that you've been living off David's generosity for 2 years, and now that David's gone, you need to face reality. The words hung in the air like tear gas. The 3 real estate agents were actively looking for exits. David's generosity, I repeated. Yes, David paid your property taxes. David covered your utilities. David made sure you had groceries and medical care. Did he? You know he did, and you know this because I was married to him. I saw him writing the checks. What checks? Victoria's face flushed. The checks for your expenses. Did you see him write checks to the county for property taxes? He handled those things online. Did you see him pay my electric bill? He transferred money to your account. Did you ever see bank statements showing these transfers? We kept our finances separate, so you never actually saw any of these payments? The blonde agent stepped forward. You know what, Victoria? This feels like a family discussion. Maybe we should give you some privacy. No, Victoria said sharply. This needs to be said. Tom, you cannot keep living in denial about your financial situation. What denial? The denial that you're anything other than a burden. The word echoed through the room. Even Victoria seemed surprised she'd said it out loud. A burden, I said quietly. I'm sorry, but yes, you're a burden. You have been since Margaret died. David was too kind to say it, but someone has to. Too kind to say what? That supporting you was bankrupting him. Bankrupting him. Yes, the property taxes alone are $8,000 a year. Add utilities, maintenance, your medical expenses. She was building steam now, letting 2 months of frustration pour out. David spent $40,000 last year keeping you afloat. $40,000. At least. And now he's gone and I'm supposed to pick up that burden? I have my own life to think about. The real estate agents were edging toward the door. So you're throwing me out, I said. I'm giving you a month to find appropriate housing. That's more generous than most people would be. Generous. Yes, generous. Because frankly, Tom, you never contributed anything to David's success. He built his own life, earned his own money, bought his own house. This house. Yes, this house. David inherited it from Margaret, and now I inherit it from David. That's how inheritance works. I nodded slowly. I see. Good. Finally. Victoria? What? You might want to check your facts before making statements like that in front of witnesses. She laughed. What facts? Tom, I'm a real estate professional. I know how property ownership works. Do you? Better than you do, apparently. I looked at the 3 women by the door. They were witnessing something they definitely hadn't signed up for. Ladies, I said, you might want to ask Victoria to show you the deed to this house before you start planning renovations. Victoria's face went white. Tom, don't what? Don't tell the truth? But I'd said enough. Sometimes the best revenge is letting people hang themselves with their own words. "Enjoy your tour," I said, and headed for the front door. I had a lawyer to call. Monday morning, I sat in attorney Margaret Collins' office with 3 manila folders on the mahogany desk between us. Margaret Collins? No relation to my late wife, just another one of life's small coincidences, had been handling my legal affairs for 20 years. She knew exactly what those folders contained. "Tom," she said, adjusting her reading glasses, "I have to ask, are you sure you want to do this?" "I'm sure. Because once we start this process, there's no taking it back. Victoria will know everything." "Good." Margaret opened the first folder. "Let's review what we have." The original deed to 447 Maple Street lay on top. Thomas Mitchell, sole owner, recorded March 15, 1987. No co-signers, Margaret noted. No joint ownership. No mortgage. You paid cash for the land and construction. Correct. She opened the second folder. Property tax records for 37 years, all paid by you from your accounts. Correct. Insurance policies, utility bills, maintenance contracts, all in your name. Correct. She opened the third folder. And this is the big one.
The Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust. The trust documents were thick, complex, full of legal language that took years to develop and decades to fund. "Current balance?" Margaret asked, though she already knew. $853,412 as of last Friday. "And David's status in the trust?" "Beneficiary during his lifetime, never a trustee, never an owner." Margaret leaned back in her leather chair. "Tom, this is a substantial estate. Victoria had no idea?" "None. And David never told her about the trust structure?" "David was a good son, but he wasn't detail-oriented about finances. He knew I helped him when he needed help. He probably never thought to explain where the money came from. So Victoria assumed that David was supporting me instead of the other way around." Margaret shook her head. "It's understandable, I suppose. Young couples don't usually have trusts this size backing them up." "The irony is beautiful," I said. "Victoria kicked me out of my own house using my own money to threaten me." "How so?" "David's life insurance, $150,000. She's been making plans with that money for 2 months. But the beneficiary is the trust, which means the beneficiary is me." Margaret pulled out a calculator. "So let me make sure I understand. Victoria thinks she inherited a $420,000 house and $150,000 in life insurance. That's right. But actually she inherited nothing. The house belongs to you, and the insurance money goes to your trust. That's right. And she's been treating you like a charity case while planning to spend nearly $600,000 that was never hers. That's right." Margaret was quiet for a moment, processing the situation. "Tom, I have to ask, why did you let this go on for 2 months? Why didn't you correct her assumptions immediately?" "I thought about that Sunday morning scene. Victoria calling me a burden in front of strangers. The casual cruelty of it. Because I wanted to see how far she'd go. And she went pretty far." Margaret nodded. "What do you want to do now?" "I want to establish clear boundaries. Legal boundaries? All kinds of boundaries." She pulled out a legal pad. "Talk to me." "First, I want the insurance claim processed immediately. The money belongs to the trust, not to Victoria." "Done. That's straightforward." "Second, I want Victoria served with formal notice that she's a tenant in my house, not an owner." "Also straightforward. How much notice?" 30 days. The same time frame she gave me." Margaret smiled slightly. Poetic justice. "Third, I want her to understand exactly what David's relationship to the trust was, so she can't claim ignorance going forward. We can provide complete documentation." "And fourth," I paused, "I want witnesses present when we have this conversation." "Witnesses?" "The same real estate agents who heard her call me a burden yesterday. They should hear the truth too." Margaret set down her pen. "Tom, that feels like public humiliation." "No. Public humiliation is what Victoria did to me. This is public education." "There's a difference?" "Victoria humiliated me to make herself feel powerful. I'm educating people to prevent future misunderstandings." Margaret considered this. "The real estate agents aren't necessary for the legal process. But they're necessary for the social process." "Explain." "Victoria spent 2 months telling people that I'm a broke old man living off family charity. Those people deserve to know the truth. And Victoria deserves to hear that truth in front of the same people she lied to." "Exactly." Margaret made notes on her legal pad. "When do you want to do this?" "Tomorrow.
Give Victoria 24 hours to enjoy her assumptions, and if she refuses to meet, then we serve the papers without explanation and let her figure it out. Margaret pulled out her calendar. I can have everything ready by 10 a.m. tomorrow. Perfect. Where do you want to meet? Victoria's real estate office, where her colleagues can see what respect looks like. Margaret looked up from her calendar. Tom, I've been practicing law for 30 years. I've seen a lot of family disputes. This isn't about the money, is it? No, it's about the disrespect. It's about boundaries. Victoria needs to learn that you can't treat people badly just because you think they're powerless. And if she'd been respectful from the beginning, then we'd be having a different conversation. I would have explained the situation privately and helped her transition to independence. But she wasn't respectful. She was cruel.
There's a difference between grief and cruelty.
Margaret closed the folders. I'll make the calls this afternoon. Thank you. Tom? Yes? For what it's worth, I think David would be proud of how you're handling this. I stood up and shook her hand. David taught me something important. What's that? That quiet strength beats loud ignorance every time. He was a smart boy. He learned from the best teacher. Margaret? No, life. Life taught him that respect is earned, not inherited. As I left the law office, I thought about Victoria's timeline. She'd given me until November 15th to move out. Tomorrow was November 5th. She was about to learn that some deadlines cut both ways, and some assumptions cost more than you can afford to pay. The quiet man was about to speak up, and when quiet men finally speak, smart people listen. Victoria was about to find out exactly how smart she really was.
Tuesday morning at 10 a.m., Margaret Collins and I walked into Premier Realty on Main Street. Victoria was at her desk, showing house photos to a young couple. She looked up when we entered, and her face went from professional smile to confusion to something approaching alarm. Tom? What are you doing here? We need to talk, I said calmly. Privately. The young couple looked between us, sensing tension. I'm with clients, Victoria said, her real estate agent composure kicking in. Can this wait? No, Margaret Collins said, stepping forward. I'm Margaret Collins, attorney at law. We need to discuss some urgent legal matters regarding your late husband's estate. The words attorney and legal matters had an immediate effect. The young couple exchanged glances. Maybe we should reschedule, the husband said. No, that's fine, Victoria said quickly. Tom, can you just wait in the conference room? I'll be right there. Actually, Margaret said, I think your colleagues should hear this too. Victoria's face went pale. My colleagues? The 3 ladies from Sunday. I believe they're planning renovations based on some assumptions that need to be corrected. Around the office, conversation slowed. Other agents pretended to work while clearly listening. Tom, what is this about? Victoria's voice had an edge now. It's about the house, I said simply. We already discussed the house. No, you discussed the house. I listened. Victoria's client couple was backing toward the door. We'll definitely call to reschedule, the wife said. Wait, Victoria called after them, but they were already gone. The blonde agent from Sunday, Jessica, I think her name was, approached cautiously. Victoria, is everything okay? Everything's fine, Victoria said tightly. Tom's just having some difficulty accepting his new living situation. Actually, Margaret said, opening her briefcase, Tom's having difficulty accepting his old living situation. What does that mean? Margaret pulled out the first folder. It means we need to clarify some misconceptions about property ownership. There are no misconceptions, Victoria said. I inherited David's house. What house is that? Margaret asked. 447 Maple Street. And you have documentation of this inheritance? David's will left his personal property to you, yes. His car, his clothing, his personal effects, and his house. David didn't own a house. The words dropped into the office like stones into still water. Every conversation stopped. What do you mean he didn't own a house? Victoria asked. Margaret opened the folder and pulled out the deed. 447 Maple Street is owned by Thomas Mitchell. Purchased March 15th, 1987. No co-signers, no joint ownership, no mortgage. That's impossible. Here's the deed. Victoria snatched the paper and read it. Her face went from pale to white. This has to be wrong, she said. David inherited this house when Margaret died. Margaret Mitchell owned no property, Margaret Collins said. Everything was purchased by Thomas Mitchell before their marriage. But David lived there his whole life, as Tom's son, in Tom's house. Jessica and the other agents were drawing closer now, fascinated despite themselves. I don't understand, Victoria said. David paid all the bills, the taxes, the utilities, everything. No, I said quietly. David helped me around the house. I paid all the bills. That's not true. Margaret pulled out the second folder. Property tax records for 37 years, all paid by Thomas Mitchell. Insurance policies, she continued, pulling out papers, all in Thomas Mitchell's name. Utility bills, bank records, maintenance contracts, all Thomas Mitchell. Victoria stared at the papers like they were written in a foreign language. This doesn't make sense, she said. David had money, good money. He was an engineer. David was comfortable because Tom made sure he was comfortable, Margaret said. What does that mean? Margaret pulled out the third folder. The Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust. Current balance, $853,412. The office was completely silent now. David was a beneficiary of the trust during his lifetime, Margaret continued. Tom provided financial support for David's education, his wedding, his various needs. You're saying Tom was supporting David? I'm saying Tom was supporting his son from his own resources. Victoria sank into her desk chair. But David told me he was helping Tom financially. David was helping Tom practically. Groceries, rides to appointments, yard work. Tom was helping David financially. The life insurance, Victoria said suddenly. David's life insurance, that's mine. Margaret pulled out another paper. The beneficiary of David's life insurance policy is the Thomas and Margaret Mitchell Family Trust. No. Yes. That money is mine. That money belongs to Tom. Victoria looked around the office. Every agent was staring at her. The woman who'd been so confident Sunday morning, so certain of her inheritance, so dismissive of the old man's protests. Tom, she said, her voice small now, I didn't know. You didn't ask. You could have told me. You could have asked respectfully. Margaret closed the folders. Victoria, you have 30 days to find alternative housing arrangements. 30 days? The same timeline you gave Tom. But where will I go? That's not Tom's concern anymore, Margaret said. You're a capable adult with a career. I'm sure you'll figure something out. Victoria looked at me with something I'd never seen from her before. Respect. Tom, I'm sorry. I made assumptions. Yes, you did. Can we work something out? Some kind of arrangement? I considered the question. Around us, the real estate office was perfectly quiet. Victoria, respect isn't negotiable. It never was. I understand that now. Do you? Yes. Good. That's the first step toward earning it back. Margaret and I headed for the door. Tom, Victoria called after me. What happens now? I turned back. Now you learn what I've always known. What's that? That quiet people aren't weak people. We're just selective about when we use our voices. And with that, we left. The silence behind us spoke volumes. By Thursday morning, the entire story had spread through Cleveland's suburban real estate community like wildfire. I knew this because Helen Davis, my neighbor for 37 years, brought me coffee and the latest gossip. Tom, you should have seen Victoria at the grocery store yesterday, Helen said, settling into Margaret's old chair at my kitchen table. She looked like she'd seen a ghost. How so? Well, for starters, she was shopping in the clearance section. Victoria, who never bought anything that wasn't name brand. Helen stirred her coffee thoughtfully. And she was alone. Usually she's got those real estate friends of hers trailing behind like she's some kind of celebrity. Maybe they were busy. Or maybe they're keeping their distance now that the truth is out. Helen had always been perceptive about social dynamics. What truth is that? I asked, though I already knew. That she spent 2 months treating you like a charity case while planning to spend money that was never hers. Helen shook her head. People are talking, Tom, and not in a good way for Victoria. What are they saying? That she showed poor judgment. That she made assumptions about finances without doing her homework. And in real estate, homework matters. Exactly. Her broker called her in for a meeting yesterday afternoon. This was news to me. How do you know that? Because my sister's daughter works at Premier Realty. She said the whole office was buzzing about what happened Tuesday morning. Helen leaned forward conspiratorially. Apparently, 3 different clients have already asked to be transferred to other agents. Why? Because if Victoria can't figure out who owns a house she's been living in for 8 years, how can she be trusted with their real estate transactions? I hadn't considered that angle, but it made sense. Real estate was built on trust and competence. Victoria had publicly demonstrated a lack of both. There's more, Helen continued. You know that young couple she was meeting with when you showed up? Vaguely. They posted about it on social media. Something about dodging a bullet with an agent who doesn't understand property law. They posted about it, with photos of the office and everything. It's gotten hundreds of likes. The ripple effects were spreading faster than I'd anticipated. My phone rang. Margaret Collins. Tom, we have some developments. Good or bad? Depends on your perspective. Victoria's attorney called this morning. She hired an attorney? Apparently. He wanted to discuss a settlement. What kind of settlement? Victoria would like to stay in the house for 6 months instead of 30 days. She's offering to pay rent. How much rent? $2,000 a month. I almost laughed. For a house worth $420,000? Market rent would be closer to $3,000, yes? What did you tell him? That we'd consider reasonable offers. And what's reasonable? $3,500 a month, first and last month in advance, plus a security deposit equal to 1 month's rent. So $10,500 up front? Correct. If she wants to stay, she pays market rate like any other tenant. Can she afford that? That's not our problem. But her attorney seemed to think it might be challenging given her current circumstances. After I hung up, Helen was studying my face. Victoria wants to stay? She asked. She wants to pay below market rent to stay. And you said? I said she can pay market rent like anyone else. Helen nodded approvingly. Fair is fair. Friday afternoon brought another visitor, David's old college friend, Mike Thompson. Tom, I owe you an apology, he said at my front door. For what? For believing Victoria's version of things. She told everyone that David was supporting you financially. And you believed her. I did. And I'm sorry. I should have known better. Mike shifted uncomfortably. The thing is, David always talked about how proud he was of your success. How you'd built this house, how you'd managed your investments, how you'd taught him about financial responsibility. So, why did you believe Victoria? Because it fit what I expected to see. Old man, dead wife, grown son helping out. It seemed natural. Assumptions again. Yeah, and I'm not the only one. A lot of David's friends made the same assumption. And now? Now we're all feeling pretty stupid. And we're wondering what else Victoria might have misrepresented about David. That was an interesting development. Victoria's credibility was collapsing across multiple social circles. Saturday morning, Margaret Collins called with the final update. Victoria's attorney called back, she said. She can't afford the rent. So she's moving out? She's moving out. But there's something else. What? She's also leaving Premier Realty. Voluntarily? Let's call it mutually agreed upon. So Victoria was losing her house and her job in the same week. Tom, I have to ask, do you feel bad about any of this? I looked around my kitchen, the one Margaret and I had designed together, the one Victoria had planned to gut and renovate. Margaret, Victoria made choices. She chose to be cruel instead of kind. She chose assumptions instead of questions. She chose to humiliate me in front of strangers. And now she's facing consequences. Natural consequences. I didn't fire her from her job. Her clients did that by requesting other agents. Because they lost confidence in her judgment. Exactly. This isn't revenge, this is accountability. And Victoria? Victoria is learning that actions have consequences. It's a lesson she should have learned years ago. Sunday morning, I sat in church thinking about forgiveness and boundaries. They weren't opposite things, I realized. They were complementary. I could forgive Victoria for her assumptions and still maintain boundaries about respect. I could forgive her cruelty and still expect her to face the natural consequences of her choices. Forgiveness didn't mean pretending nothing had happened. It meant accepting what had happened and moving forward with wisdom. Victoria was moving out next weekend, and I was moving forward with a new understanding of my own quiet power. Sometimes the best lesson you can teach someone is to let them teach themselves. 3 weeks later, I sat in my living room reading the Sunday paper when the doorbell rang. Victoria stood on my porch with a moving box in her hands. Hi, Tom. Victoria. I found some things that belong to you. Photo albums from when David was little. Some of Margaret's recipe cards. I opened the door wider. Come in. She set the box on the coffee table and looked around the room she'd planned to renovate. It looks the same, she said. Why would it look different? I don't know. I guess I thought you might change things after everything. Some things don't need changing. We sat in the quiet for a moment. Tom, I owe you more than an apology. You don't owe me anything. Yes, I do. I treated you terribly. I made assumptions about your life, your finances, your worth. I was cruel when I should have been grateful. And now? Now I understand something I should have understood from the beginning. What's that? That David learned his values from someone, his kindness, his generosity, his quiet strength. He learned all of that from you. I nodded. David was a good son. He was, and you were a good father. I just couldn't see it because I was too busy making assumptions. We all make assumptions, Victoria. The question is, what we do when we learn we're wrong. I'm trying to learn from this. Good. I found a job in Columbus. Fresh start, new city. Maybe I can do better there. I hope you can. She stood to leave, then turned back. Tom, can I ask you something? Of course. If I'd been respectful from the beginning, if I'd asked questions instead of making demands, would things have been different? I thought about that. Probably. I would have helped you transition to independence, given you time to find your feet. We might have found a way to honor David's memory together. Instead of fighting over it. Victoria picked up her purse. I guess respect really isn't negotiable, is it? No, it's not. Thank you for teaching me that. After she left, I opened the box she'd brought. David's baby pictures, Margaret's handwritten recipes, small treasures that had somehow ended up in the wrong hands. I thought about the past 3 months. The funeral, the confrontation, the legal resolution, the natural consequences. Victoria had learned an expensive lesson about assumptions and respect. But I'd learned something, too. I'd learned that quiet strength doesn't mean silent acceptance of disrespect. I'd learned that boundaries aren't walls, they're guidelines for healthy relationships. Most importantly, I'd learned that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply tell the truth and let people deal with the consequences of their own choices. David would have been proud of that lesson. Margaret would have approved of the quiet way I'd handled it. And me? I was at peace. If you're watching this and you've ever been underestimated because of your age, your quiet nature, or your humble lifestyle, let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to remind someone that respect isn't inherited, it's earned? Sometimes the best response to disrespect is simply proving them wrong. And sometimes the most powerful people in the room are the ones who don't need to prove anything at all. Until next time, remember, quiet doesn't mean weak. It just means selective.